Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about the natal chart of Dimitrios Pagourtzis. He is the Santa Fe, Texas high school shooter. And first off, I want to just reach out if anyone, any family members happen to see this of the victims of this shooting, of this heinous crime. My condolences and my prayers are with the families of the victims of the shootings, a very horrific crime. These kind of crimes, unfortunately, almost becoming a norm in the United States, sadly. Anyway, talking about his chart now, I did a chart based, it's a solar/sunrise chart. Couldn't find a time of birth, obviously. He was born on October 12th, 2000, so the year 2000. So anyway, well, in his solar sunrise chart, he has a preponderance of planets below the horizon. This suggests a lot more introversion, introspection, being a lot more pessimistic than optimistic, and a lot more subjective as opposed to being objective. Now, having the Sun in Libra, in a negative manifestation, Sun in Libra, of course, it's in its fall, can take the law perhaps into their own hands in terms of crimes they could potentially commit and create their own law or what have you, whatever he or she feels is lawful or justice, so to speak, their own justice. Now, he has pretty much a long opposition to the moon in Aries, and this could show contentious situations with others, perhaps, and he has the basic want for peace and tranquility, which is the Sun in Libra. It's opposing that emotional need for combat and confrontation, which is the Moon in Aries. And this, of course, can cause a lot of emotional turmoil, exasperation, and tension. Actually, I want to get to another thing. Besides its opposition, which could, of course, signify turbulent relationships with others, he has Venus in Scorpio, and based on the solar sunrise chart, okay, it's at 21 degrees Scorpio, which of course is a critical degree. Venus in Scorpio, of course, it's in its detriment, makes an opposition to Saturn. So looking at this, perhaps feelings of vengeance, vindictiveness, even jealousy, sometimes maniacal jealousy, could be hard to express, and it might be where people in authority, of course, strongly may be opposing, and older people are in opposition to this. And perhaps now, another thing too is he has Mercury, what I call in surreptitious Scorpio, squaring Uranus in Aquarius. Now, people with this may having Mercury in adverse aspect to Uranus may often like to shock or surprise others, and it could be with outlandish behavior, in this case when you have especially Uranus in Aquarius. Now, apparently, from my understanding, when I searched on the internet, he had yelled surprise right before the shooting. He has Scorpio, based on the solar sunrise chart I did, he has Scorpio at 18 degrees on the second house cusp, and Sagittarius at 18 degrees on the third house cusp. Now, 18 degrees in astrology can be seen as somewhat demonic to the degree of the devil. Now, I don't see this as necessarily demonic, but it could indicate perhaps an inclination, it's a greater propensity for strong, nefarious, vile, malevolent behavior. And Scorpio at 18 degrees on the second house perhaps may incorporate sinister, sadistic qualities into the value system. And Sagittarius at 18 degrees on the third house cusp perhaps can show some kind of warped or demented philosophical outlook affecting the rational mind. Foolhardy thinking, perhaps, and exceptionally foolhardy thinking, maybe. Now, he also has the ruler of the third house in the 8th house of death. Now, his thinking may well have been strongly tied into murder, and this, he really, and Mercury in Scorpio obviously doesn't help matters. This could only perhaps exacerbate that. Now, In his chart, too, Pluto is about 3 degrees from his Chiron in Sagittarius. Now, perhaps this could suggest wounds associated with murder and death and connected with reckless and foolhardy and even audacious actions, which might have been done with a lot of exuberance and enthusiasm. And Sagittarius, of course, that energy, Sagittarius generally doesn't do things on a very small scale. It could often be on a very large and prodigious scale. And when he yelled surprise, that showed me that he really, he enjoyed really this, I think, to some degree anyway. I'm sure he's not enjoying his incarceration right now, but he is, but he certainly, I think this was something he actually took a lot of pride in, unfortunately. And anyway, the thing about this too, this was really no shocker to me that the planet Mars is very a significant emphasized planet in his chart. Now, first off, it's a singleton. It's the only planet he has in Earth, and his midheaven and ascendant were not in Earth signs either in the solar sunrise chart. Now, this is Mars in Virgo in the 11th house. Now, the thing about this is, looking at it, the singleton, of course, could put a lot more, and being a singleton could put a lot more emphasis on it, to be much more accentuated and emphasized. But also, too, it's the focal point of a T-square configuration involving an opposition between Pluto and Jupiter, and the square to each of those points by Mars. Now, the thing about this is and this really can accentuate again that acrimonious, acerbic Mars energy. Now, the thing is too, and what it is in this T-square, what happens is in it, when you have a T-square configuration, the focal point will often be that point of overemphasis, over-accentuation, overcompensation to deal with the opposition in the configuration. Now, when you have Pluto and Jupiter making that opposition, this could give a very strong, distorted sense of power, perhaps. And if you want to break this down, dissect it more by planet and house that the planets in this opposition are in, well, Pluto in the 2nd house, well, that could, I think the way that could manifest in this case, this could be about dealing perhaps with some kind of obliteration or destruction, maybe to one's self-esteem and self-worth, and opposing the Jupiter in the 8th, and being in opposition, of course, that Plutonian energy, that destruction or obliteration to self-esteem, self-worth, opposing that ability to have maybe show exuberance and enthusiasm maybe in making a major change or transformation in one's life. So of course this could be something where then because of this tension created by this could result in this Mars in Virgo in the 11th house energy, really about as far as dealing with the situation. And really, in this particular case, it could result perhaps in a lot of this this volatile, you could say, volatile actions that were maybe done with a lot of premeditation, a lot of Virgo-like analysis, and perhaps done really with a lot of that Virgo-like meticulous attention to detail. So, this could be, and also too, this anger might have also been tied into being in Virgo, maybe being excessively criticized and really ridiculed, maybe because he had claimed that he had been bullied, I think verbally, by students and coaches. So anyway, and also note that this is in the 11th house, the Mars in Virgo. So this is carrying out these actions, these acrimonious actions with this acute analysis, attention to detail, and directed at groups, acquaintances, contemporaries. Now, this is also, and also again as a result of harsh criticism that he may have received by these people. Now, the fact that this is really, again, it's that focal point. It's very, I mean, this makes it very strongly emphasized. And again, being the singleton in the chart puts a lot of emphasis on this planet. So anyway, another thing about this too is that interesting with this Mars in Virgo in the 11th house, it's actually not far from the 12th house cusp of imprisonment. Now, which could indicate, of course, that volatile actions can really be about self-undoing, and that could happen in many instances, but more emphasized in this case, and also too can lead to some kind of imprisonment or incarceration and greater propensity for that. Now, the thing about this too, again, he did stated something about being ostracized and bullied by coaches and students. Now, at this time, transit North Node in Leo at a critical degree was in his 10th house in the solar sunrise chart. Now, this could suggest perhaps having to confront issues of bullying connected with authority figures and really done perhaps in a dramatic fashion and receiving, sadly in this case, some exposure and notoriety for this. Now, bullying, I think in a negative manifestation, can be associated with the zodiac sign Leo more so than the other zodiac signs. Now, also too, and really, as I say, I mean, in a very negative manifestation, that Leo energy can be connected with that. Now, the thing, what I thought was one of the more interesting things about this, what happened here in relation to his own astrology chart, was that transit Mars in Aquarius had made no adverse aspects to any of his major astrological influences in his chart at the time of the shooting. And that when I'm talking about major astrological influences, this could be very subjective, of course, but I'm referring to the planets, his MC, and the ascendant. So, well, what does this mean astrologically? Well, I think in this case, perhaps it allowed him, unfortunately, to carry out this shooting. This was connected with unpredictable violence and volatile behavior, and really was able to do it with really no interference from anybody. I know he was eventually apprehended, but at the time he basically essentially was able to carry out, I believe, what he intended to do, unfortunately. So, and the thing too about this is also at the time of the shooting, transit Moon in Cancer, I mean, could have factored in a little bit, because he did this, I believe, as a result of this excessive ridicule and criticism, perhaps connected with bullying. And Cancer energy, of course, is very sensitive to that, coupled with the fact, based on the solar sunrise chart, it made a very tight square to his natal Moon in Aries. And of course, Moon in Aries, that as far as negative qualities, attributes connected with that, could result in very really emotional, acrimonious type behavior. And really another thing too, what I thought was really interesting with this event with him and relative to his chart, transit Pluto retrograde at the time was making an applying conjunction to his south node in Capricorn in the 3rd house of early education. Now, however, it had previously made an applying conjunction to his south node, and of course made the separating aspect conjunction after that, after it passed through it, when it was in direct motion. Now, remember that Pluto can be connected with coercion, which of course I think can include bullying. Now, this suggests that perhaps this was something that was going to come to an end when that Pluto actually passed the south node in that when it made that applying conjunction initially, when it was in direct motion. Now, the thing about this is, when it went retrograde, it was making the applying conjunction, but even though it didn't pass it and separate it, the point being, transit Pluto was still conjunct his south node. And just generally speaking, I think this could indicate or suggest perhaps wanting to obliterate a redundant situation connected with authority figures that were involved in his early education. And I think really this is something that he made, I mean, his business to try to eliminate. I think a lot of that transit Pluto hitting that south node in Capricorn perhaps had something to do with this. And another thing interesting about his chart, he has in the solar sunrise chart the north node in Cancer making an exceptionally tight conjunction to the MC. So sadly, it was almost like his future and where where he was going, his future was perhaps connected with getting some kind of notoriety, attention, and recognition. And maybe being in Cancer, the fact that it was going to be something of a very emotional and sensitive nature, this was going to be tied in to maybe him dealing with sensitive issues in dealing with this criticism, with this ridicule, with this thing that were something where he was maybe feeling very, that made him feel very vulnerable, perhaps, and he wound up, perhaps there was some kind of attention that he received that was connected with this placement. I think a lot of it has to do with that north node conjunct his 10th house cusp. So anyway, and also, you remember that the 10th house is also about authority figures. So there you go. I mean, his future, unfortunately, was tied in to getting recognition in connection with this because, I mean, and naturally, he was eventually apprehended by law enforcement, which is authority figures, of course. And also the fact that he was, he had these issues with coaches at his school, which of course are authority figures. So these were things that were really, it seems like based on the North Node placement, were really sadly maybe destined to happen with him. So anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for my take on the natal chart of Dimitrios Pagourtzis. And anyway, tune in next time where I will be giving my take on what I think is the strongest sun sign in astrology. Two things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone. Because astrologically speaking, the person is the sum of all their components in their natal chart and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.